Alright, so welcome back to part 2 of What's in the Box for Dominion Menagerie. Since we didn't get through all of the action cards that exile cards, for this video, we're going to finish up with the last 2 exiling cards that are action cards. And then we're going to go ahead and do the events and the ways that work with your exile mat. So let's get started. Alright, so here we have Sanctuary. You'll get a card, you'll get an action, and you'll get a plus buy. You may exile a card from your hand. So that's cool. You don't have to exile a card from your hand, but you could if you wanted to. Maybe, get rid of an estate. Oh, that's a good one. If you can exile all your estates to the exile mat, you'll get to keep them for the points towards the end of the game, but they won't be filling your deck with useless cards. So that's kind of a cool aspect. I like that. That's pretty cool. Then we have the Gatekeeper. Now this is another attack card. This is the third one. Manta Ray was the second one we did. Cardinal was the first one you did. So this is our third attack card. So, Gatekeeper is a nice duration card. There are 4 duration cards in this expansion. So Gatekeeper is, at the start of your next turn, you get +3 money. There's a lot of durations that do that, right? You get 3 money at the next turn. That's pretty basic for duration cards. Until then, when another player gains an action or treasure card they don't have an exiled copy of, they exile it. So, let's say they decide they want to buy a gold, or gain a gold, right? And they don't have a gold sitting here on their exile mat. If this is in play, they're going to exile that gold they just got. So it'll be a while before they can get it again, obviously. Now, if there is a gold already sitting on the exile mat, for instance, and they decide to buy a gold with Gatekeeper in play, then they will not exile it in the process. So that's kind of cool. I like that a lot. That's a pretty cool attack card. It could definitely make it so you have it takes longer to get around to getting to play, obviously. So that's pretty cool. I like that. That's pretty nifty. That's a pretty cool attack card for sure. All right, cool. So that's the actions that exile cards. Let's go over the ways first, since they are a new type of card. So ways are a new way of playing your action cards. If you play an action card, you may choose to either play it like normal, whatever it may do, or you may play it as a way. Now, when you play with ways, it's recommended you only play with 1 way per game, which means it'll be a long time before you get to play with all the ways, because there are 20 different ways. So, it could be a while before you get to play them, obviously. But that's still pretty cool, that you can change how you play your action cards. So, another thing to note about the ways is there's a card in this expansion called Mastermind, and it's very similar to Throne Room, or King's Court for that matter, right? Well, when you play it, it allows you to play your action card 3 times, basically. And so it's actually 3 separate times you'll play it, right? So for each separate time that the Mastermind will let you play a card, you can play that Mastermind you can play that action card as a way. You could do it as a way for the first time the Mastermind activated. Then you could do it for the way the second time, and then you could do it for the action if you wanted to. For instance, so that's kind of interesting. So here we have Way of the Worm. This one exiles an estate from the supply. That is very useful, because then you can just get a whole bunch of victory points, and they'll just sit on your exile mat until the end of the game. And then at the end of the game, you're going to have all of those victory points. So that's really cool that the estates have. That's kind of a cool... Now, if you're playing with other expansions that reward you for having victory cards at the end of the game, lots of victory cards, like maybe Silk Road from Hinterlands, for instance, that could be very powerful. It could give you a lot of extra victory points, for sure. So exiling a state from the supply, that is a pretty cool way. It may look, boring because it's just a worm, right? But it does something that's pretty cool. It makes you think twice. Is it worth playing as a way once in a while, your action card? Maybe it is, because that's really cool. Then you have Way of the Camel. Exile a gold from the supply. So that's kind of cool. You could play an action card to exile a gold from the supply, and then whenever you happen to gain or buy a gold later down the road, you might have some golds sitting on your exile mat. So that's really cool. I like that. So those are the ways that work with that. Then we have the events. So let's go over the ones that work with exiling. First we have transport, and it costs 3 to buy. And obviously events, if you guys know events, they stay on the table. They do not go into your decks when you buy an event. They stay on the table. So choose one. Exile an action card from the supply, or put an action card you have in exile onto your deck. That's kind of cool. So you could exile an action card from the supply. So let's say you only had 3 money and you wanted a really good card and you couldn't get it right now. You could exile that really good 5 costing card, perhaps, for instance, and then later down the road, when you do have the money to buy that same card, then you could also get that card you exiled from your exile mat here and, put it into your discard pile at the same time. So that's really cool. Or you can put an action card you have in exile onto your deck. So if you have an action card sitting on your exile pile, you can put it onto your deck. So that's kind of cool. First time you play it, you could exile a Mastermind, put it on your exile mat. The second time you buy it, which would probably be your next turn, you can move that Mastermind from your exile mat and put it onto your deck, which is really cool because normally when a card leaves the exile, it's going to go to your discard pile. So that's really cool that you could put it to your deck. That's really cool. So that's a really cool event, Transport. And it's kind of thematic too, Transport. That's pretty cool. Okay. So then we have Banish. Exile any number of cards with the same name from your hand. That's kind of cool. Okay, so let's say you didn't have a way of trashing cards. Let's say there isn't any cards in the game that let you trash cards, right? And that could happen. That does happen, right? So, and let's say you're getting hit by attacks, and you got all of those awful minus point cards all at once, and then now they're shuffled and they're in your deck, and you have at least 4 money for your purchase at the buy phase, and you have a few of those curses, wastelands, sitting in your hand. You could exile any number of them with the same name from your hand. So you could just put them back here and get rid of the whole filler thing. Because you can't get rid of them because you don't have a way of trashing cards. So that's one strategy you could use with the Banish. You could also do that with estates. If you want to hold on to your estates, but you don't want to trash them, you could exile any number of estates from your hand, which is possible. You might, there might be times where you have 4 money and you have 2 estates sitting in your hand. So that's a good way of getting rid of those estates without actually getting rid of them at the end of the game. So that's really cool. So that's just kind of a strategy that you could do with this. And I'm sure you guys could think of other things you could do with Banish. Then we have Invest. Exile an action card from the supply. While it's in exile, when another player gains or invests in a copy of it, plus 2 cards. So, investing. I don't 100% investing. I'm going to have to look it up and see in the thing. But if you, I'm assuming investing is like exile. Oh, that's what it is. Sorry, my bad. Okay, so this is invest, right? And so if somebody was to purchase the invest event, invest in a copy of it, you would get 2 cards. You'd get to draw 2 cards every time somebody purchased the invest. So that's pretty cool. Because you exiled an action card from that supply, it could sit there on the supply for a while, and when another player invested in a copy of it, you'd get to draw 2 cards whenever they did it, as long as it was still sitting on your exile mat. That is really cool. It could sit there for a long time, right? That's possible. And you could get 2 cards every time as a reward. Or when another player gains a copy of the card sitting on your exile mat as well. That's really cool. You'd get 2 cards. So let's just say you exiled a good action card that, you know, usually is one of those cards that gets bought instantly a lot. That's usually the first one that goes in the supply. A really good one, right? And so you're assuming they're going to be buying it quite a bit. It's going to be purchased a few times at least, or gained a few times for that matter, or invested a few times for that matter. You could get some cards as a bonus while it was sitting there. That was really cool, as long as it's the same one. So I doubt this rule would work if you later down the road took it off of your exile mat, and then you gained the same card, but you gained it, I don't know. But anyways, that's pretty cool. I like that a lot. We won't delve into that too much, but that's really cool. Then we have Enclave. This one costs 8 money. Why is that? Why does it cost 8? Well, you'll gain a gold, and then you'll exile a duchy from the supply. Ooh, awesome! Usually you'll avoid them, not too often, right? Sometimes you'll go after a bunch of duchies, but usually you won't go after a duchy right away. But this is for 2 extra money, you get that gold that you still wanted for 6, but for 2 extra money, you get to exile a duchy from the supply. That is awesome. 3 extra points that isn't going to fill up your deck with useless victory cards. A filler card, for sure. That is a really cool event. So that's awesome. Okay, so that's it for exiling. I think we've covered everything that goes over exile for this expansion. So next we're going to go over horses, the cards that work with horses. And that might take at least 2 videos.